Hey everybody, today I am going to be reviewing Deadpool and Wolverine. This was directed by Sean Levy. I'm sure this is no surprise to the people who watch me regularly, but I am a little bit spotty when it comes to the trajectory of the MCU in the last maybe 10, 15 years. So when I do venture out to go see one of these movies, if it's random or for a movie review, whatever, it's just the characters, a lot of the cheekiness, the inside jokes, they tend to just go right over my head. A lot of the tension in these movies comes from your outside knowledge and not necessarily, what's happening in the present moment in the story. So it's like, a lot of the time, all these moments are built to, like a big celebrity cameo of somebody in a superhero costume. It feels very much like a curtain call at a fan expo, and it's like, I see these movies with audiences, and I can hear, the moment one of these cameos comes up, it just gets a huge applause because obviously these people are a lot more knowledgeable of things than me, and I'm always kind of like, yay, I don't know what we're applauding. But it is clear within the last few years that the popularity of, superhero movies has waned, and, the quality, I would say, is not quite up to its original luster. There is an existential crisis point happening right now. But Deadpool is one of the few superhero movies in the last 10 years, I'd say, that works very well. In fact, I think it's quite brilliant at what it was able to achieve. It's meta, very pop culture obsessed, one reference after the other, and people know I tend to resist those kinds of gimmicks in movies typically, and yet the character of Deadpool feels so free within the logic of his world that I tend to buy into it. It's like he's not afraid to plunge into very cynical territory, and he also does feel like a fully dimensional character, even if he is cheeky by design. He's violent and ruthless in combat. There is a physicality to a lot of the violence here, and there's also a sense of sensationalism and fun. You can see skull fragments flying through the air in slow motion, all of that, and yet Deadpool, the contradiction there of course is Deadpool is Ryan Reynolds, who leans heavily into that kind of millennial hipster suburban dad thing. It's like he can choke somebody out one minute but never ask him to change the tire on your car. Maybe he can change the tire on your car, but he's going to lean into the joke that he cannot. They bridge that machismo energy with the more effeminate energy, and there's a confidence always, and I'd say more often than not the humor tends to land. He can be annoying, and obviously there's a lot of homoeroticism going on here. That confidence gives him the ability to flirt in uncomfortable areas that most people wouldn't go near, and I love the shamelessness. I love just the image of Deadpool sashaying down a catwalk, essentially. Deadpool, of course, was originally a Fox property, and then it became a Disney property. So the idea with this third movie is they're wanting to make a movie that is basically one giant corporate inside joke. And I found that to be intriguing, especially when your crossover is framed in the style of like a buddy comedy action movie. Wolverine being, deadpan compared to the energy that is Deadpool. It's like, in theory, this is a fantastic idea. If you have been following my reviews much this summer, you can probably tell it's been a fairly mediocre summer. Nothing has really stood out to me so far as, like the highly anticipated, big blockbusters and such. So it is a low bar, but, I'd have to say, based on what I have seen, I didn't hate this. I had fun with it. I thought it was pretty entertaining. My feelings on it overall is that it almost sunk its teeth into something substantial so far as meaning when it comes to the meta-examination of this particular subgenre. Just not quite. The legs are not quite hitting the ground. What works about it are the individual elements. All of them tend to be pretty strong. It's the personality, it's the humor in the writing, it is the chemistry between the two leads. And they at least try to give these characters some emotional, personal obstacles that they need to overcome, which does, help with my own investment. Is this the strongest film in the Deadpool franchise? I would say absolutely not. Would I say that this film reinvents the multiverse angle in a way that does feel fresh or at least unique? No. And as a piece of direction, it did have its moments, but I don't think it was particularly striking. I wouldn't say many of the sequences really stood out to me. That said, there was a feeling, an undercurrent in the movie that did appeal to me, even if it was kind of slight. The way that it mocks the downfall of the MCU, or just maybe the lack of interest in superhero movies, there was a cynicism to it that, I don't know, it appealed to me. Now, I wanted that feeling to have a lot more edge and a lot more boldness. I wanted the feeling of like we're walking away from the burning building, but we're sticking our middle fingers up in the air. Yes, the movie can be very clever at times, especially with all the meta references and such, and yet I feel like it hinges its bets way too much in that direction rather than, on the meat, the core of the story. If the emotional aspects feel undercooked, then all of the meta stuff on top of it just really doesn't mean as much as it could have ultimately. It just feels like we're filling the dead air with self-awareness as some sort of defense mechanism. I appreciate that they're trying to keep the story focused, especially when it is set in the multiverse. Sometimes that can be kind of difficult, but just so many of the plot elements here, yeah, they feel like afterthoughts compared to the commentary about the MCU. The test allies and enemies period in the midsection of the movie, it left a lot to be desired for me. Just so far as, when you're structuring a story, I feel like that aspect of things is very important to get to know your characters. But here you don't gain any traction because we don't learn much about these characters. They are only here really to exist as fan service for audiences. The movie wants you to know that it's lost. It is stuck in the abstract by design. Literally the characters are like, where are we? Oh, we're in a purgatory. In this void, unsure of the moment, unsure of what our present identity is. Yes, the idea behind all of that is quite clever, and yet, I just don't feel the risks here because it's just not tangible. This just feels like you're getting a bunch of comic book characters together for some sort of sketch comedy routine. It's more to see how they bounce off each other so far as banter rather than having a strong, gutsy point of view. I just wish that this experiment would have felt more cohesive like a story and less like an experiment, that it had more of a firm grasp on its inner workings, because I think had that happened, this would have been fantastic. It's not always funny, but when this movie is funny, it is really funny. And when this movie is thrilling, it is really thrilling. But when you put it all together, just something is missing. Though I have to say, I think the opening of the film, fantastic, sharp. The idea of Deadpool breaking apart this corpse and using it as a weapon against his foes, I think it's creative. And of course, the metaphor of it all, it's just, yeah, it's funny. It's funny as hell. But then you have sequences where it's like you can see where they're aiming, but it's not quite landing. As an example, maybe in the midsection, it's like you've got Wolverine and you've got Deadpool and they're really getting on each other's nerves. So they decide to have at it with this big slugfest in their car, and it's set to the song You're the One That I Want from the musical Grease. Felt a little too on the nose humor-wise, and you kind of have to be careful with that. Sometimes you can lay it on a little bit too thick. The writing, the point of view, it's just like it's all there in theory, and it's like you really want it to make that leap. It just couldn't match the ambition with any sort of substance in the resulted product, and that is kind of a shame. That said, I do think that this movie is, worth your time if you like these kinds of movies. See it as a fun matinee or as a stream at home, but I don't think this brings out the best in the Deadpool property, nor does it bring out the best in the X-Men Wolverine property. But that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commission portraits and I sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who are great. Guys, thank you so much for your support. Welcome to all the new members. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.